Welcome to Brown and Black, where we take a look at race and pop culture through a brown and black lens. I'm Jack Rico.
And I'm Mike Sargent. On today's show, we'll be exploring the rise of Afro-Latinos in the mainstream media with cultural anthropologist Dr. Judith Anderson, plus award-winning children's book author and illustrator Eric Velasquez.
And a live musical performance you won't want to miss.
This
is Brown and Black. Afro-Latinos are having a major moment in pop culture. Celia Cruz, the Queen of Salsa, will be featured on The Quarter in 2024. Ariana DeBose became the first Afro-Latina to win an Oscar, and Spider-Man is now Afro-Latino Miles Morales.
2023 and 2024 have been banner years for highlighting the many contributions of Afro-Latinos across entertainment and culture. But will this pave the way for the next generation of Afro-Latino creators? Or is this just a blip?
There are an estimated 6 million Afro-Latino adults in the United States whom only make up 2% of the U.S. population. So how has such a small group accomplished so much?
The recent official inclusion of Afro-Latina in dictionaries and academic discourse validates the identity and experiences of countless individuals within the Afro-Latino community.
Throughout the last 2 centuries, Afro-Latinos achieved remarkable milestones across various fields, contributing to the ongoing struggle for recognition and representation. Well, Mike.
All right, well, you know I have to ask you, Jack, as a cultural critic, and in reality, it was you who were inspired. A conversation we had inspired this, like what's happening? Why are all of a sudden Afro-Latinos everywhere, in everything? So my question to you is, trends happen, okay? Is this a trend?
Or is it a fad?
Is it a fad? Is it a blip? Or will this last? And if so, why do you think it will or won't?
Listen, first of all, when the conversation about race in America happens, it only happens between black and white. Latinos aren't involved in that conversation. Afro-Latinos, worse. They're not even really seen in that conversation. When you talk about Latinos, you don't really mention the Afro-Latino community. And when you talk about the black community, do Afro-Latinos actually come up in the conversation? So then where does storytelling and shaping and filmmakers who are Afro-Latino, where are all the Afro-Latino stories happening? You feel like they really haven't happened, Mike. And so when we watch these movies now, all of a sudden they stand out, because we had such a lack of these stories that now we're seeing black skin speaking in Spanish.
Without subtitles.
Without subtitles, and it's in English. It's a mainstream movie like the Spider-Man Across the Universe. So this, I believe, is something novel, something new. And I think every storyteller wants to hear new stories, new perspectives, new depths that allow you to see things in the world differently. And by the way, they're black and Latino, so they're like the best combination of those two cultures, languages, and styles.
So, is it gonna last?
It's gonna last, buddy.
I hope you're right, because I'll be honest, I think the only way it will last is if it continues to make money. Because I think one of the things that happens, especially for anything that's non-white, you're only as good as your last thing. It's like, what have you done for me lately? Yeah, well, these two did good, but this one didn't.
So you're telling me they're testing this, the
I don't know if they're testing. I'm saying right now we're seeing this. I probably am a little more skeptical than you that this will last. I hope it does. I really do.
Okay, so here's a question I have for you, because I think that this is one of the biggest plights that the Afro-Latinos have. Okay, let's say you're an Afro-Latino actor in Hollywood. When you're being cast as an Afro-Latino, you're either cast as a black person or maybe as a Latino. And a lot of it, Mike, really has to do with your skin color. Colorism plays a huge role in people being cast. So
absolutely.
Why is it that Hollywood likes to take Afro-Latino actors and lean them over to black more than to Latino?
Well, I think part of it is what you just said. I think, the conversation is generally, the casting, even the notes is generally, like how many scripts do you think they come across where this dark-skinned person is going to start speaking Spanish right now? Or let's throw a little Spanglish in here. I think part of it has to do with the fact that Afro-Latinos really don't have an identity yet. like a mainstream identity. It's not like, you know, yes, we can point out.
There's no narrative.
There's no narrative. There's not even like a cliche, like how are you an insulted Afro-Latino? Like there are all kinds of,
it's so new.
It's
right.
so new. So I think on one hand, I think that's exciting. But I think on the other hand, the downside of that is that, yes, if Zoe Saldana gets cast, they see her as a black actress. If any actor, Laz Alonso, is not necessarily seen as being Afro-Latino, he's the black character in the story.
Right.
And I think part of that has to do with the writers, because there's that binary, black or white, like you said, that's the American conversation. And I think because it just hasn't happened yet.
So what do you think in particular is going to happen with storytelling in Afro-Latino?
Well, my hope is that, and I don't think it's just casting that has to happen. I think it's really about the experience. I think it's really about showing, like, understanding that Afro-Latinos have been here a long time. We need, as you always say, the Roberto Clemente story. We need the Celia Cruz story. We need to understand those contributions and how much of a part of society they've always been.
Well, coming up next, right after the break, we speak with Dr. Judith Anderson, cultural anthropologist and Afro-Latin Americanist, about what she means when she says racism is the mother of colorism. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Brown and Black. Today we're talking about the Afro-Latino experience. And to help us do that, we have with us Dr. Judith Anderson, cultural anthropologist and Afro-Latin Americanist. She's also an associate professor of ethnic and race studies at the Borough of Manhattan Community College.
Dr. Anderson, welcome to Brown and Black.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
So in the United States, agencies, business, they want to reach multicultural people. One of the groups that they want to reach is Afro-Latinos. But here's the thing. In order for you to understand the Afro-Latino experience, you've mentioned that you really have to understand their whole American totality. And that's including South America, Central America. Why is this crucial to understand the U.S. Afro-Latino here? Yes.
We have to think about, I always tell everyone, think about the Americas with an S, right? There are so many nations that make up the Americas. We all do have this connected history through colonization, specifically through the settler colonialism of a few distinct European powers that came over to the Americas and colonized, right? These economies and peoples have been linked for over 500 years. That is the reality. And the things that we're seeing today that we deem to be new and crises, like crisis at the border. Why are all these Haitians coming through the Mexican border?
Right.
These are not new. These are not new things. These are not new populations. These are not new movements. These individuals have been moving, and their ancestors have been moving around for the last 500 years. That is the reality of the Americas. When we think in particular people of African descent. Now we just have different political boundaries, we have different legislation, we have different people in power, different rules, different economic and social ties between the nations. Even within our own states, we've seen the conflicts there, dealing with different populations of Afro-Latinos coming in.
Well, you know, we were talking a little bit in our last segment about colorism and what I like to call the caste system within the casting system. So you've recorded as saying that racism is the mother of colorism. Tell me what you mean when you say that.
Yes, these two concepts are tethered together. You can't really think of them separately. They're very much tied up within each other. You really have to buy into racism to believe in colorism. Racism holds that there is something that can't be changed about people, something that they attribute to biology. Although we know that, of course, race is a myth, right? It's a social construct. But at the heart of that myth is that there's something that just can't be changed about these people, something biological. There's no hope, right? You can't change that. And also, this idea of hierarchy is embedded within racism, right? And so in order for colorism, for you to believe in colorism, you have to also believe those two things. You have to believe in the hierarchy, right? And you also have to believe that this is something immutable that cannot be changed about these individuals. So that's why they deserve to be treated in that way.
Doctor, when you look at the future of Afro-Latino culture within the mainstream, within Black, white, and Latino, how do you see them standing out? How do you see them? Will they be thriving? How does this group in particular differentiate themselves in a positive way in the future, the next 10, 20, 30 years? How do you envision that?
Yeah, thinking about the future of Afro-Latinos here, number one, we have to remember they've always been here. They've been here as long as the U.S. has been here. We have some very famous examples. You know, especially here in New York City, we think about the Harlem Renaissance figures like Arturo Schomburg. You can even think of a figure like Marcus Garvey, right? We have so many important figures who have connections, who are directly from the region, or their parents were from the region. So we can't think of this as any sort of new population. This is a population that has a very long history in the U.S., even going all the way back to the colonial era and thinking about the Maroon societies that also existed in the U.S. as well. And the relationship between, if we look at the state of Florida, right, in southern Florida, the Black pirates that were there. That we have people who are coming from the Caribbean, who are coming from other areas. We have people who are returning to Africa. We have all of this kind of movement that is happening with these populations. So they have a long history here, number one. So in order for that to actually be acknowledged and become part of the mainstream and part of that storytelling, we have to then take the curtain, you know, remove the curtain from Hollywood and see, okay, who's behind that curtain? Who's controlling things? Where are your Afro-Latino writers, producers, right? Directors? I mean, it's hard to name
It's
any.
hard, right?
Yes,
Right?
it is.
Not just the people focus on the actors, and that's great. But what have we seen with the strike? The actors have very little power.
Dr. Judith Anderson, thank you for being on Brown and Black. Well, after the break, we speak with groundbreaking award-winning children's book author, Eric Velasquez.
And welcome back. Eric Velasquez is a children's book author and illustrator who created one of the first Afro-Latino children's books, Grandma's Records.
His work has been recognized with numerous awards, including the Coretta Scott King and the Bura Belpre Award for illustration. Velasquez has dedicated his career to using his art to tell stories that broaden the understanding of the Afro-Latino experience.
Eric, welcome to Brown and Black.
Wow. It's quite an honor. Okay.
So, Eric, I have to ask you just the question to kind of get a sense of you as an Afro-Latino. How did your complexion play into you establishing your own identity in the society?
Well, to be quite honest with you, I never really thought of it that way. At home, you know, we spoke Spanish and ate foods from Puerto Rico. And then when we went to, you know, to school, I assumed the identity, let's say, of an African American to kind of blend in, because I think my friends would just say, hey, how come you got a funny last name? And you got a bit of an accent and all this. So my whole task was sort of just to blend in. So when you say that, you know, my complexion, it's I never saw myself as anything other than just who I am.
When it comes to your books, when you decided to become an author, there was intention behind it. One, you decided specifically not to tell stories of Black or Latino specifically, but of Afro-Latino culture. And you also decided to write children's books as opposed to adult drama or anything else. You could have chosen anything. Why these two specifically?
So I do tell African American stories, and of which the Afro-Latino experience is folded into. When I decided to write Grandma's Records, I just wanted to tell the story of my family, you know, the story of my grandmother, my mother and father. You know, I would spend the summers with my grandmother. So I was more interested in telling more of a personal memoir. And the world just, you know, stamped it. This is the Afro-Latino experience.
Well, that's interesting. Now, when you started, did you have any were you thinking about it as being specifically Afro-Latino, or are you just thinking it's something personal?
I only as something personal, yeah. And that was like the very beginnings of the story was, so as illustrators, I work throughout the night and keep company with many other illustrators that work throughout the night. And we entertain each other by telling each other stories. It could be anything. And it was a good friend and illustrator, Keith Henry Brown, who said, hey, why don't you tell me that story again about, those summers that you spent with your grandmother and the time those musicians came to visit. And he would constantly call me 2 o'clock in the morning and goes, hey, man, remember that story you told me about your grandma? And so eventually he says, you should really consider writing that. I think that would make a really good children's book. So that was the beginnings of Grandma's Records.
Well, now what's interesting about that to me, because I know you were an illustrator first. So you were illustrating the work of other writers. And to make the leap then to not just tell a story, but tell a children's story, tell a personal story, and then you had all the success that you even had a sequel. So how fulfilling or, satisfying or gratifying was that?
Oh, very fulfilling. And the fact that it was so well received, I was astounded. And, at book signings, people would show up and say, hey, I drove 5 hours just to meet you. I want my daughter to meet you. I want my son to meet you, because they're not accustomed seeing themselves in the book. So, they would come and thank me. And then to this day, I still get many emails from people just stating their gratitude for the book and the fact that they see themselves in these pages.
That's what I was going to say, Eric. What do you feel is your role as an author of children's books? Do you feel that you want to shape the minds of young America? Does it start there?
Absolutely. And just providing them an image of themselves through these stories. Because I think once you see yourself in these pages, you can begin to dream things. So my role is to provide the youth of America with these images.
Well, it's interesting because you've had these images. You had Grandma's Record, you had Grandma's Gift, and then you had Octopus Stew, which is also another personal story from your life. So you've been mining your life for a minute here. And has there been any talk about TV series, movie, animated film, adapting any of these stories? Because, in our last segment, we spoke to Dr. Judith Anderson. She talked about the importance of not just having Afro-Latinos on screen, but having Afro-Latino writers, creators. That's what you are. So what are your thoughts on that?
So there has been, I was once approached by a theater company that wanted to bring Grandma's Records to a stage as a stage production. So I put them in touch with the publisher, and let's just say that the talks fell through.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think it was mostly because it was a not-for-profit organization. I'll just leave it there.
Well, Eric, you've been at this for a long time, for a while. What does it mean for you to start creating stories that uplift the Afro-Latino experience, and then to see it all over the place, spanning across music, film, television, publishing?
It just brings me so much joy. I see them all as my children, to be honest with you, because when I wrote Grandma's Records, there was very little visibility for the Afro-Latino, and now, on any given day, whether through music, film, or any other of the arts, I see Afro-Latinos, and it just warms my heart. There was a time when we all were in hiding, or we cloaked ourselves into a different identity. And now to see us all out and proud and speaking Spanish in public, because I even have family members who, when they go out in public, they don't speak Spanish because they don't want to hear, oh, you speak Spanish so well, where are you from? And these are complete strangers. So as a result, they tend not to speak, Spanish in public. And now it's, when I walk the streets, and it's just random conversation, I'll see some Afro-Latinos having a conversation, and it's like, that's beautiful,
Thank you, Eric. When we come back, a musical performance from award-winning Dominican guitarist and composer Yasser Tejeda.
Welcome back to Brown and Black. Our next guest is international recording artist Yasser Tejeda. Known for his bold fusions of traditional Dominican sounds with modern jazz and rock, Tejeda joins us today to share his latest single, Todo Va a Marchar, from his latest album, La Madruga.
Yasser, welcome to Brown and Black. Thank you. So I have to ask you, having listened to your other albums, I just heard this album, you're always about the connectivity of culture and music and blending it. But what was your inspiration for this album? Why did you want to focus on what you did here?
My inspiration for this album, La Madruga, is the Afro-Dominican traditions, the celebrations that happen in the countryside of the Dominican Republic, and doing more research about it and knowing the rhythms and knowing these traditions and blending it with my influences. I started playing rock music, metal music, heavy music. And then I passed to blues, funk, jazz, Brazilian music. I like to play all kinds of music, bolero. So the spectrum is huge. And I wanted to blend my influences with Afro-Dominican music to put a stamp to my music of what is Dominican music, or what is a new vision of Dominican music. That is not only merengue and bachata. We have palos, we have gaga, we have congo de Villamella, we have sarandunga de Baní that is in the album as well. And I got really inspired in those rhythms, in the celebrations. Even some of the lyrics are around life, death, and the cycles of life and death, because some of the celebrations are for funerary events. Those celebrations are for saints, and those celebrations are to celebrate life, celebrate culture, and celebrate resistance as well. Because in Dominican Republic, even merengue and bachata is the most popular rhythms, but the rhythms and celebrations and rituals that happen in the countryside sometimes are denied and even, kind of marginalized, even in our own country because of race, culture. Misinformation is the most crucial one. And, I learned about these rhythms and these celebrations because I'm a musician. And when I went the first time to a celebration in the countryside, I was 18 years old, 17. I cried. I had goosebumps. And then I recorded my first album. And when I saw that, I said, whenever I'm writing my music, I need a little bit of this because I want to show to the world what Dominican music is.
That's wonderful.
Yes.
Well, Yasser, thank you so much for being here. You're now going to be performing for us your latest single, Todo Va a Marchar, and we can't wait to see you perform it.
Yeah, we're going to let you go set up.
Cool. Thank you so much for having me.
That's it for us, and thank you to all of our guests. We'll see you in the next episode of Brown and Black.
Canta conmigo y verás cómo tus penas se curan. No le des mente, vamos allá. Que al final todo va a marchar. Vivir la vida, buscar la vuelta, positividad y estar alerta. La vida sigue y sigue igual y parece que el mundo no quiere cambiar. Canta conmigo y verás cómo tus penas se curan. No le des mente, vamos allá. Que al final todo va a marchar. Vencer los miedos, vuelve a intentar seguir los sueños hasta llegar, sentir la clave, felicidad, vivir los días, no hay nada igual. Canta conmigo y verás cómo tus penas se curan. No le dé mente, vamos allá. Acá al final todo va a marchar. Todo va a marchar. Mueve pa' aquí, mueve pa' allá, mueve tu cuerpo, no pares jamás. Bota lo malo, echa pa' allá, dale pa' afuera, no te dejes parar. Abraza la vida, absorbe lo bueno, mantente latente que lo tuyo viene. No diga que no, no coja presión y da. Canta conmigo y verás cómo tus penas se curan. No le des mente, vamos allá. Que al final todo va a marchar. Canta conmigo y verás cómo tus penas se curan. No le des mente, vamos allá. Que al final todo va a marchar.